Hello and welcome to 3 Greens Monthly, another new 3 Greens series where we look back at what occurred across aviation safety every month. From hard landings to forced landings, everything you need to know about what occurred will be here. This month, we'll look at the peculiar and developing case of a Russian airliner forced into an emergency landing after a series of failures, a smoke-filled cabin incident in Singapore, Changi, involving an Air China A320, and a hard landing in Beirut, causing substantial aircraft damage. We'll also look at a report released on an interesting occurrence, involving an airport in Italy, a disconnected controller, and a Ryanair crew. Let's get into it. First is a mysterious case of a field landing in Omsk, Russia. It occurred on the 12th of September, and it was initially reported by news outlets that the A320-200, which was carrying 161 passengers and 6 crew, commenced a go-around due to a hydraulics failure. With the crew concerned about the problem affecting the brakes, they decided to divert to Novosibirsk, about 320 kilometers away. Here, there would be a longer runway, but about halfway there, they performed a forced landing in a field, described as an unplanned landing by Russia's Federal Agency for Transport. Ural Airlines later reported that the 320's green hydraulic system had failed, affecting the operation of the spoilers and flaps. The failure also meant that the landing gear doors were stuck open, and it was this, the airline stated, along with strong headwinds, that was the cause of increased fuel consumption, resulting in fuel exhaustion on the way to Novosibirsk, and the subsequent emergency landing. There were gaps in the story, however, because a green hydraulic system failure in an Airbus A320 would typically disable the entire landing gear system, not just the doors. Questions were also raised about the pilot's decision to divert without the required fuel. So 2 days later, the story changed, with the captain stating to investigators that the go-around in Omsk was actually due to weather, and it was during the go-around that the hydraulic system failed. After deciding on the diversion, it was only after the point of no return that the fuel quantity began to critically decrease. The captain selected a landing site with just 5 minutes of fuel remaining, and directed the cabin crew to prepare for an emergency landing, with everybody on board surviving. The story of the Russian A320 doesn't end there though. Ural are reportedly planning to fly the plane out of the field. The airline has cleaned the aircraft, stowed the slides, and serviced the engines, as well as dug the landing gear out of its own trenches. There are no reports on exactly how the takeoff and departure will occur, but it could be a sign of just how desperate the Russian airlines are for aircraft, given the sanctions imposed on them after the invasion of Ukraine. Our next story was on the 10th of September, when Singapore Changi's runway 20 left was closed for 3 hours. The closure likely caused significant disruption, but the event that caused it could have been much worse. An Air China Airbus A320, registered B305J, was performing Flight 403 from Chengdu to Singapore, with 146 passengers and 9 crew. As it descended, the crew declared an emergency, stating that they had received smoke indications in their forward cargo hold and the lavatory. The aircraft landed on runway 20 left, and stopped immediately on the runway, with passengers seen evacuating via escape slides soon after, and emergency services extinguishing a fire in the left-hand engine, a Pratt & Whitney 1127G. 9 people on board received minor injuries in what was no doubt a terrifying event. The airline reported that the smoke event was caused by an engine mechanical failure, which preceded the emergency landing. Engine fires shouldn't typically cause substantial smoke to be delivered into the cabin, but complications with the bleed air system may have contributed, so it'll be interesting to see what Singapore's authorities find in their investigation. Our final major story involves a DHL freighter that you may have seen doing the rounds on social media. Substantial damage to the airframe was caused by a hard landing in Beirut. It touched down on the runway at 19:15 local time, with a force so strong that the crew received minor injuries and the aircraft received visible damage. It did manage to roll out and taxi to the apron at Lebanon's capital, but an investigation commission has been formed to determine the causes of the accident. For each 3 Greens Monthly, we're going to discuss a hot topic, and in this month, it's turbulence. Turbulence is actually one of the most common causes of injuries to passengers and crew on aircraft, and in September we saw 2 clear examples of this. On the 8th, a Hawaiian A320 encountered severe turbulence en route from Tokyo, Haneda to Honolulu. It was climbing out of Tokyo at the time and encountered the turbulence through flight level 270. The aircraft returned to Haneda 95 minutes after departure. 4 passengers received minor injuries, but none needed to be taken to hospital. An even bigger turbulence event occurred on the 25th of September, with a JetBlue Airbus A320 encountering extreme turbulence, with altitude deviations of -50 to +800 feet. It was en route to Fort Lauderdale and continued to its destination, but a number of the aircraft occupants were injured. The NTSB are investigating, and historic weather data shows there were build-ups in the area at the time, so it's another report and another set of findings to look out for. Looking at some reports that were released in the last month, one that stands out is a case of superb airmanship. On October 18, 2022, a Ryanair Boeing 737 was instructed by air traffic control to line up on runway 04 right in Venice, Italy. According to Italy's ANSV report, released in September, a new controller then plugged in, but incorrectly plugged their headset into the telephone line instead of the radio. Due to this, the next communication, clearing Ryanair 973 for takeoff, was never transmitted. Low visibility procedures were in effect at Venice, which made it impossible for the Ryanair crew to see an Iberia Airbus A321 on their final approach for landing right behind them. However, they were able to notice Iberia 3242 on their TCAS display. The crew tried to communicate with them through the universal guard frequency, but they received no response. So as the 320 descended through 400 feet, the crew began to vacate the runway. As they did so, the controller's headset issues were finally sorted out, and the tower came back on frequency, instructing Iberia 3242 to go around. The incident in Venice, now with the context around it, shows just how important it is for pilots to maintain situational awareness throughout an entire flight, because you never know when a non-normal event will occur. And that just about wraps up 3 Greens Monthly for September. Let me know if you have any feedback in the comments, and if you like this new style of video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Until next time, fly safe.